Welcome to Inner Alchemy, a space devoted to exploring your potential for spiritual awakening and human evolution. My name is Bria, and I am a guide on the path to those seeking to uncover their power for self-healing and inner transformation. For over 15 years, I've walked a path of deep devotion and practice to modern mysticism, Ayurveda, and meditation. With this podcast, my purpose is to share with you some of the insights and attunements that are coming to me right now in my work with my students, my community, and my teacher, as a way of passing the torch to you with some of these evolutionary ideas. Whether you're looking to awaken your intuition, your feminine essence, your healing power, or to simply understand the wild journey that we're making on Earth right now, I hope this serves you well. In today's episode, we're exploring the topic of imagination as a gateway for unlocking your potential as a co-creator of this reality. Before we begin, I wanted to thank you for being here today. If this work speaks to you, I'd love to ask you to subscribe, share, and stay connected. So, to begin our exploration of imagination as a tool for the co-creation of our reality, I'd like to invite you to start to remember what it was like when you were naturally tuned into your imagination as a child. If you can somehow remember the type of things you would imagine, how you would play, and that infinite field of possibilities that would come from that state. Right? If you can just start to tap into that a little bit, it will help you understand the space that we're exploring right now as adults within ourselves. And the second piece that we want to acknowledge is that for a lot of us, at a certain point, we were taught that our imagination was wrong, or what we were imagining wasn't real. It's like, stay here in the real world with us, right? Or in the version of reality that's been given to us, but may not be so true to you anymore, right? So when we're going to start talking about the topic of imagination, or the field of potential that lies within our imagination, it's normal that this part of ourselves at first might feel a little bit blurry or hard to grasp, or that we might not fully trust this part of ourselves. And then for most of you, if you're following this work, at some point in your awakening journey, you probably have asked yourself, what am I doing here? Right? You've probably taken a moment to sit with that question of like, what is my purpose and what else is there? Either through pain or a crisis point in your life, or maybe just this deep sense of knowing that there must be something more. And if you really sit with that question for some period of time, you may start to get answers. You may get an image or a vision or some kind of words or clues, right? And at first, this vision might seem a little bit vague or a little bit hard to reach from the reality that you're in right now, right? In my work with clients, I often see this where people come to me because they have a certain sense that there's a part of themselves that they can't quite touch. It's like they're kind of half alive, and either they're depressed or just that they have this sense that there's more to living, that there's this part of themselves that they want to access, and they want to know, can I actually trust this part of myself? Or, can I really access this part of me, this magic of myself that I'm imagining for myself? Because sometimes from where we are in our lives, it can feel like something is lacking. I can definitely relate to this in my own story because early in my awakening journey, I was working in a corporate job for the government, and I was starting to go deeper into practices like meditation and ancestral ceremony. And the ceremonies for me were really key in my awakening. And like I was having these huge shifts in my inner world and in my soul memories, and how I was experiencing the very fabric of my reality, of my life. It was such a powerful opening to me, and I said, well, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, how, I'm working in the government. And at that time I had a second vision that I was going to be, that my next step was to do these ceremonies with a teacher, with someone older. But instead of doing the ceremonies for my own healing, I was going to be doing them around the planet. And this might have seemed like a really lofty goal, like where was I going to find this teacher, right? It didn't seem like something concrete in my reality from what I had experienced so far. But then a few months later, I did meet that teacher, and it was like it was already in my soul plan, and I could recognize her because I had imagined her before our meeting. Right? So what you might access through your imagination, it might not relate to something that's presently in your life. Right? So sometimes there's a part of your soul that knows something is there for you, is part of your potential, and it's really up to you to take the step in and staying with your intention as you walk through your life. And we'll talk more about that. Sometimes we can be a little bit apprehensive about empowering our imaginations, but what most of us don't realize is that most of the world that we are imagining is coming from our programming. It's coming from what we've been told we need to do, or we need to have, or who we need to be in order to be happy, or who we need to be in order to be loved. Right? So sometimes it's hard to admit that most of us live in a kind of hypnotized state where we dress a certain way and we watch the news and we believe that a reality is the way that we're told it is, but perhaps it's not. Right? I was speaking to a really good friend of mine recently, and he's in the business world, and I said, it's like the economy. Do you think that the economy is the same economy that you're reading about in the news? And he said, absolutely not. Like, he's flying around the world and doing all these international business deals, and he's like, no, it's not, right? But the power of our minds and our imaginations are mostly hijacked by the consciousness of the collective, or what we're told we should believe, right? And we see this so much through our movies and through how sex is promoted in the media and movies, right? All of this dimension of like fantasy and imagining a better life than you have right now, all the social media, right? Which is basically taking the power of our imagination to make us unhappy, make us suffer, or feel like we are missing something in our present world. And that might be the case, but it's like the imagination gets trapped in a certain dimension, right? So we see this with the news, with politics, with celebrity culture, with a lot of fashion trends, right? So we want to distinguish, and this was spoken about also in the Yoga Sutras by the sage Patanjali, where he basically said that the imagination is part of the mind, that if we learn how to use it properly, it can be the source of our greatest creativity and the greatest innovations. But if we use it improperly, then it's going to destroy us, right? So if we're going to learn to become keepers of the imagination, which is part of what we're exploring right now in the Inner Mysteries School, in our 1-year program, part of it is learning how to train ourselves, how to train the mind to relate to this field of unlimited reality, right? Or more subtle reality, let's say, right? And training the mind to be used in a more disciplined and intentional way, right? The other thing is that perhaps you've had the realization that the life that you're living right now, there may have been a time in your life before where you actually imagined where you are right now, right? Even if it's not perfect, right? Even if you don't have everything you want, right? Where you're recognizing that where you are right now is perhaps something you've imagined, right? And when we have this awareness, we start to realize, oh, I'm already creating this. I may not have fully harnessed my potential of creation. I might be imagining that I'm a bad mother or a bad girlfriend, or that I'm unlovable, or that the world is harsh. But to just sit with the fact that perhaps you're already creating what you're experiencing. Right? And that's not to say that you're to blame if you're experiencing something challenging or painful, but that potentially you have the power inside of you to create something different. I remember early in my awakening process, I was in my teen years, and I had a huge crush. And my crush, he had a crush on me, and I knew he wasn't like going to be the great love of my life, but we were enjoying this cat and mouse game. And then at a certain point, I remember thinking, I really wish, like, he's not asking me out, but I really wish, like, he would really realize how special I am, something like that. And within just a few weeks, there was another guy who appeared on the scene and made this huge dramatic proposal to me in front of my crush, in front of all my friends. This big romantic scene. He asked me to go out with him. And honestly, it was like whatever every teenage girl would want to experience. It was very flattering. But I went home and I thought, like, I imagined that. I didn't want to go out with this crush. I wasn't really ready to be dating at that age. But I was imagining this whole scene really just to flatter my own ego. Like, I wasn't really using the power of my imagination to create like something that was really deeply satisfying. So at that point I started asking, well, what else is there? If I can really imagine anything and I don't have to be afraid, then what would I want to create for myself? And this is when I started having the vision for the life that I'm living right now. So this whole idea that our imagination has the power to create our reality or to tap into a field of infinite potential might sound a little bit abstract to you. But for those of you who like to be a little bit more grounded and realistic, we can also talk about how some of the greatest innovations of our time have actually come through the imaginations of our scientists and inventors. So this happened in Niels Bohr's invention of the planetary structure of the atom, or with Albert Einstein in his awareness of the speed of light, which gave to the theory of relativity, or our understanding of the double helix structure of the DNA, or even the periodic table of elements. So actually, in a very concrete way, many of the greatest advances in scientific history have actually come through when these great visionaries, these great minds, have allowed themselves to relax and to tap into the power of dream and imagination. Actually, they say that when Larry Page invented Google, the idea for Google actually came to him through a dream. And this is a little bit funny for me because I have this joke that I invented the internet. Not literally, but at that I was in grade 7 when the internet came out, and before that my brother was really into computers and whatever we had before the internet was created, some kind of dial-up thing, and I was imagining at that time, like, what would be the next step, like what would be better than this kind of simple basic technology that we had at that time. And I imagined like almost like an encyclopedia where you could go on and you could access all of the information that's available in the world. And then I went to school one day and the teacher said, okay, this is the internet and this is Google, this is how it works. And I said, oh yeah, I knew that was coming because I had imagined it, right? So I don't have royalties on that, but this is also spoken about in the mystic teachings, that we have this field of information. It's a field of consciousness. It's a field where we call it the celestial body, and it holds our connection to our creativity and to other cosmic planes of existence, and also to new possibilities for human evolution. So it's like a body of information that holds all of the knowledge that already exists on the planet, as well as any knowledge that's ready to exist. Right? So they say in the mystic teachings that this is where inventions and, artists and scientists, when new inspirations are given to humanity, they're coming from this field. And you really just have to have the right antenna to be able to tap into this field, and then actually have the audacity or the courage or the willingness to actually birth these ideas into form. Right? And so if you don't actually give birth to that idea, to your inspirations, then someone else will do it. Right? And so if I wasn't really well resourced to create Google at that time, but someone else took care of it for me. So, right? And so this is really important to recognize, because we don't realize how important our inspirations are. Right? We sometimes think, I'm not worth it, I'm not worthy, I don't know enough, but just the act of learning how to create. We start with the act of learning how to create and how not to judge your creations or the inspirations that come to you. Right? And I can't tell you how many brilliant, like genius level people that I've spoken to who have certain inspirations, like for innovation, let's say for like water purification or some kind of vision that seems a bit out there to them, but they never actually trust themselves enough or take the time to birth that creation, right? And this is part of why we look around right now and we see that humanity seems a little bit stuck, or also why so many new visionaries and new ideas and new healing technologies and new advances are coming through humanity right now, because we actually are in the middle of a paradigm shift where we're actually needing to make a major upgrade to the way that we relate to life, the way we live and how we relate to life on this planet. And so more and more people are tapping into this field of consciousness. The other thing that we want to speak about here, that we want to explore together, is that you are meant to be a creative being. Right? And this is really important if you're on the path of healing. You are meant to tap into your creativity. It doesn't have to be a big piece of art or anything that's going to make you famous, right? But basically, if we look around, we have to recognize that most of humanity has been kind of hypnotized into just being consumers, right? Or another way of seeing it is that now that we've achieved a certain level of material well-being, right, our next step is to start using our creative potential towards our own passions, right? Because if we don't do this, there is a quality of our energy that basically gets stuck. Your creativity is very close to your godliness, to the activation of your higher potential. And so if you're not somehow tapping into that creativity within you, if you're just consuming social media, the news, magazines, right, you're going to be putting yourself into a kind of a trance, right, which feels like a state of depression or despondency or just not really feeling totally alive, right? It's like something's missing in the activation of your life force, right? So unlocking our creative power, even if it's just a garden or you're cooking, right, is a really key part of our healing process and our awakening process. Because without that, a part of us grieves. And there's a totally different quality of energy, and we do this in our group work. When you start touching that place, even if it's just like bad poetry, right? There's a totally different activation of your energy that happens when you're touching into your creativity or to the world that's inside of you. So at some point, if you haven't already, you may have already started to touch into the power of your imagination or the potential of your imagination, or perhaps you can relate to some of the experiences that I've shared that you haven't been able to put words to, right? Or maybe you've touched this place often through like a personal crisis or like a deep sense of longing that something's missing, or just a sense of knowing that there's more. You start drawing yourself to this space of inner questioning and introspection, like what's missing here? What do I need to do? What would I want to experience? Like what does life want to live through me? Right? So here are a few ideas. I've prepared 5 different clues for you for how you can use the potential of your imagination to become more free and more alive. So the first clue is just to honor that your imagination is there, and to understand that somehow it is already linking you to this field of infinite potential. Right? And so honoring your imagination means that you start to give space to this part of yourself, either on your walks or in your daydreaming or in your creative process. Before I started the path of meditation, I would do this on camping trips. I would just stare, at the lake or the ocean, and just my mind would go to a different space naturally. Like different brainwaves happen, I think, when you're in that space, and I could start resourcing myself for the next phase of my journey. So when we're imagining, we really want to honor the visions that you receive, even if they seem weird or odd, or you feel shy about them or ashamed of them, right? Or the visions you have might have nothing to do with your day job or something that you feel like you can concretely bring into your world, right? But it has a different quality of energy that is linked to the feminine self. So whether doesn't matter what your gender is, it's linked to this part of you that is receptive and it has a quality of love. It has a quality of feeding you. It nourishes you. And it also is related to, it has the quality of pleasure also. The pleasure of being alive, even if you're in a place of pain or you're in a place of confusion when you're touching that part of you. We practice the imagination in our work together often as well, whether through breath ontology or our group work. And actually at the foundation of any shamanic training or tantric meditation, when we say feel, sense, or imagine, right? You may start with, trying to imagine, or your mind might be more busy, but then slowly your capacity for subtle perception develops, and suddenly you're not imagining anymore. You're actually perceiving this field of co-creativity or infinite potential. You can actually create with it. So we do this often in our group work together and in our one-on-one sessions. And I often hear where people will say that before I gave the instructions, they already sensed where we were going, right? It's because at that point you're not trying to think. We're actually in that field together. It's not something from the book, right? So this is something you can do through practices or through your own contemplation. And it's really important to honor this part of yourself that might be a little bit weird, or it might be a little bit ahead of your time, or you might need to be alone to sense these parts of you, right? It's this part of you that's the imagination is often drawn to something that doesn't exist yet or is still in gestation for you. Right? And that brings us to our second clue, which is stillness. So some time in contemplation or in silence or in introspection with your journal is really, really important. Right? Sometimes we come to that place of introspection because we feel like something's missing, or because we're in some kind of crisis point, or we feel like something must be wrong with us. But for many people, it's actually in this place where they start tapping into the deconstruction of their old identities and an opportunity for the higher self or the intuition to enter. Because in that pain, a part of you is actually being broken down, right? So you become a lot more open to receiving a different way of being. Right? You're just fed up with your old ways, with your old depressions, with your old stories, right? And there's a part of you that's really sincere in wanting to live a different way or to relate to a different impulse in your soul, right? So it's really important that we give space to stillness, and that we're brave about our capacity to feel the full range of our emotions, right? And so in some ways to do this work, we have to be willing to feel things that other people may not want to feel, or to question things that other people may not question, or to sit with uncomfortable truths about ourselves. in order to grow beyond that part of ourselves, right? Stillness is also really important today because it's so often that we are just constantly bombarding ourselves with more information and more stimulus and more news and more, right? So our true creative inspirations cannot really come through in that space. So there's a purification of the mind that takes place in our inquiry process, in our stillness, in our meditations, in retreat, right, where we're training our mind to a different state of receptivity, time in nature as well, right, or time when we unplug. So space is very much part of being an artist or a visionary or an inventor or any part of doing this work. In Ayurveda, the space, the emptiness is where everything is born. It's not about doing more, right? And to give yourself that space, no one's really going to give it to you. In our culture, we kind of have to define it for ourselves, right? So not to judge yourself for needing that alone time, that mystic time. The third clue that I have for you is that your visions are just a gateway, right? So when you start imagining a different way of being, a different way of living, right, you may receive certain visions, and sometimes those visions come from your higher self. And sometimes those visions will come from your programming or the small self or the part of you that wants to be good or wants to be like everybody else or has some kind of idealized reality that you think you need to get to, right? So your visions can come from different places, and it's really just like a clue of how this is going to work. And like the real visions, actually it doesn't really matter where the visions come from, because the process of living itself will guide you. Like the vision, you take the vision and then you have to like show up in your life and make certain choices. And there's a process where your old ways of being are being broken down. So there are tests and challenges along the way, like a process of refinement or of burning off old karmas and ways of being. Right? So your visions are going to give you a clue, and then your job is basically to sustain your intention and to trust the process. Right? So even if your reality doesn't look like your vision right now, you're able to sustain your heart. You're able to sustain your intention and trust life. And also navigate your life in a different way that's not so much in opposition to the flow of life. So it can sometimes give a bigger perspective, like a zooming out on how you think your reality should be or how you think you should be. It gives us different meaning to how you're understanding the life you're in right now. Right? And sometimes that place of imagination will take you to a place of ultimate simplicity, right? Like where you're just bringing yourself almost into a state of total stillness, just with being, just with your cup of tea, just with reality exactly the way it is. So oftentimes we think it's like about a big invention or creating something grandiose, but at this time of transition on planet Earth, sometimes it's not so much about what you need to do, but just in how you're relating to life itself, how you're enjoying your life, how relaxed you are, how much pleasure you have, how much time you have to dance and be alive. So this brings us to our fourth clue, which is linking back to that imagination you had as a child, which is that the imagination comes from a sense of play. It comes when you don't take yourself so seriously, right? So sometimes the ego will beat you up and think you have to achieve some kind of grand vision, which may or may not be the case, right? But the steps, the building blocks along the way are actually created through the field of play, right? Because your pleasure is actually a quality of energy that allows creation to move differently for you, right? It doesn't mean, it's not always about working really hard or forcing things to happen a certain way, but learning, you can still work really hard, but you're learning how to work with that connection to source, right? To your own inspiration. So that allows you to lighten up a little bit and let go of the process. I remember one of my dear students was re-entering the field of dating after taking a break for a few years. And she was really trying to make it work with this guy who was really into her. And then she said to me one day in one of our sessions, just kind of offhandedly, wouldn't it be nice if, I could just meet someone who saw me walking around the city and like doing my normal things like grocery shopping and going to the art store, and someone just saw me and said, oh, she's really pretty, I would like to get to know her. And she just said it kind of offhandedly, and I just listened. And then a few weeks later, she broke up with the first suitor, and then she re-entered online dating. And immediately, a young man proposed to her to go out on a date, and he said, I've seen you around town, I know where you shop, like exactly what she had seen in her imagination. Like, this is the guy, go out with him, right? So so in that state of imagining how it could be easier for her, she wasn't trying to fix herself, she wasn't trying to fix the guy, she wasn't, it was just like an offhanded sense of like, how could this be easier? How could this be more fun? How could this be more playful and easy? Right? So accessing the quality of imagination has a lot to do with these qualities of the feminine, which is related to trusting the flow of your life, trusting what life gives you, receptivity, right? Having pleasure with life the way it is, right? Having gratitude, right? Letting yourself be taken care of, right? It doesn't mean you don't work, it doesn't mean you don't show up, but it means that what you have in front of you is sometimes some kind of stepping stone to your next step, even if it feels like friction, even if it feels like it's not what you want. So this is really what you're doing with your breath ontology practice every day. For those who've done that program, one of the things you're doing is training yourself to relax and training yourself to receive. It's actually like giving yourself a homeopathic dose every day, like a little micro dose of well-being, of relaxation, of contentment, of not needing to overthink, so that when you go into your life, you're in a different state of awareness and receptivity and co-creation with the flow, with what is. The fifth clue that I will give, that I wanted to share with you today is, this is the final clue, that some of your visions that come from your imagination are about you, and most of the ones that are the most powerful are impersonal. So it's not necessarily about you trying to get something, although you can use it for that if you would like to. But what I've found to be the most powerful and the most expansive is when you're imagining something that's bigger than you, that serves humanity. Right? Because there's a part of ourselves that wants to use these teachings to like control life, right? To get what we want, to get the white picket fence, and to become the most powerful healer on Instagram or some kind of vision, right? But it's really important to realize that if you have certain challenges in your life, it's because you, on some level, are passionate about that specific challenge. It's not because you're bad at it. It's not because you're being punished. It's because something within that challenge is teaching you a lesson that you need to heal, that you need to learn, that you need to evolve in being here on earth, right? So as much as you can imagine, okay, what is my next step? What could my next step be in my career, in my creativity, in my relationships? You can use this for that. But more and more in this work, we want to try to come out of the personal I and tap into something that's bigger than you, right? Like, what does humanity need? How could we do healthcare differently? How could we do our schools differently? How can we do retirement differently? Or sometimes we can imagine for others. I have a really good friend who has a lot of, this is actually a crazy story. I have a really good friend who has a lot of financial problems, and she just is not really good with making money, and she's an amazing person, but it's just not her strength. And so for a while I would just kind of imagine for her, like, what else is possible? Like, how could she do this differently? And the idea came a few times where it was like, she could just, there's a lot of baby boomers in this neighborhood. Maybe someone needs her to, like, maybe someone would just leave her their house, or like, she could help someone die or something, because she doesn't have any family. And that actually happened. Like, someone actually, one day, like a random person called her and asked her if she would manage her estate. Like, she was near, I think she has cancer or something, and she's in good health, but she wants someone to manage her estate, and like, she was going to make it lucrative for her, right? So I don't know how that situation's going to end for her, but it's like that we're actually imagining each other. We're actually imagining our partners. We're imagining, and that imagination is actually part of how we experience our world. If we imagine, oh, this person's always stuck, oh, this person's always in pain, oh, this person has so many problems, our judgments actually have an impact on that person. But when we're actually tapping into, oh yeah, that person's so beautiful, that person's so interesting, I can see the potential of that person, right? Not to be naive or idealistic, but just to see what's possible, to start relating to the field of possibilities, right? Can be really powerful, right? We actually do this in our meditation circles or in our group work, right? Where we're tapping into something that has kind of like a archetypal quality. It's not about you necessarily, but it's like there's a quality of energy that we work with that has this unspeakable dimension or this unspeakable potency or this real like poetic beauty that actually has a healing quality to it. And sometimes we come back from that place together and you have like this beautiful insight or inspiration about what to do next in your life, and it's like beyond the mind. Sometimes it's just like you just need to relax about that, right? But it takes us out of the mind loops and into a broader dimension of ourselves. Right, and what I've found is that if we're really focused on what's needed for humanity, right, the smaller things somehow get taken care of. Like life becomes more like an adventure, and things start getting presented to you that are beyond what you would have planned for yourself. It's like the shock, the surprise of the universe actually acting in your favor, like these incredible synchronicities that you didn't know they were coming, right? So a lot of it is in how we learn how to surrender and receive from life, accept from life, even through our challenges, even when things are hard. So we are going to be going deeper into the theme of imagination in our work together in our Inner Mysteries program, our 1-year program, as well as into the fall, and next year's program will be starting in September, where we're going to be opening a space to honor and explore this part of ourselves. And what I'm finding is the more that we invest in exploring this part of ourselves, the more is given. It's like I'm honestly constantly in awe of what comes through you guys and in our learning together and in what you're reflecting and teaching to me. So I hope these ideas are helpful for you. It is my absolute honor to share this conversation with you. And if you've enjoyed these teachings, please feel free to share this message with a friend or to send me a message and let me know what you think. And thank you so much for sharing this time together and for your commitment to making this world a more beautiful, conscious, enlightened, co-creative place. I look forward to seeing you soon.